Let's start to taste. Perfecte leuze om te beginnen. In ieder geval, iedereen welkom. Welkom op deze Start to Taste online. We hebben er al een handse pak gehad. Het is leuk om dit te blijven verder doen. Mensen blijven geïnteresseerd en enthousiast over dit concept. Dus we blijven vooral verder gaan. Binnenkort kunnen we dat ook doen als we allemaal buiten zitten, als het wat beter weer is natuurlijk. Vanuit onze tuin. Start to Taste online vanuit de Nof. In plaats vanuit het kot. Lijkt me nog een leuk concept. Wie weet. Maar goed, vanavond is het thema Rusland. Voor de mensen die Start to Taste nog niet kennen, die er de eerste maal bij zijn. Start to Taste staat voor smaken. Dus mijn naam is Dimitri, Bonte, by the way. Straks hoor je ook nog Hans Tack. Dat is mijn rechterhand. Wij zijn samen Start to Taste. En Start to Taste staat voor smaken. Je zou zeggen, als wijnhandelaar met smaken bezig zijn, dat is logisch. Dat lijkt me logisch. En wel, dat vinden wij ook. Nochtans zijn er heel veel die zich laten begrenzen door een landsgrens. Wat Start to Taste doet, of wat wij doen, wij laten ons leiden door een smaak. En die is niet begrensd door een landsgrens. En dat is vanavond dus te duidelijk, want wie had ooit gedacht dat er vanavond een thema ging zijn zoals Rusland? Of dat er Russische wijnen bestonden zelfs. Dus ondertussen hebben wij al onze 4e container Russische wijnen binnen. En dat is in een 2,5 jaar zo, een 2,5 jaar in die tijd ongeveer. Waaronder ook een jaar COVID, moet je zeggen. Dus die Russische wijnen worden zeker geapprecieerd en gesmaakt in Vlaanderen of in België. Ik zou alvast een praktische zaak is, mocht je vragen hebben tijdens de presentatie, smijt ze gewoon in de chat. Hans zal die chat opvolgen en zal de vragen dan ook uiteraard stellen, vuur à mesure, naar lang dat we tijd hebben, of nu en dan een keer aan Michael zelf de vragen doorgeven. Dus, alstublieft, het is interactief. Shoot al uw vragen. Je mag jezelf eigenlijk ook ontmuten. Ik heb er eigenlijk geen probleem mee. Maar bon, we moeten natuurlijk zorgen dat er toch een beetje orde is in de klas, om het op deze manier te zeggen. Jullie mogen alvast zeker de flesjes open doen. En ik stel voor dat jullie van ieder flesje een half flesje uitgieten, zodat je eventueel nog iets over hebt voor op een later tijdstip. Of voor toch nog vanavond uit te drinken, wie weet. Zo ondertussen krijgen ze wat zuurstof en hebben ze eigenlijk de deur van een bloei open in uw glas. Okay.
So Michael, important, if people have questions, they will do it through the chat. Don't mind the chat, I will do. So from time to time, I will, if it's the right time, interrupt and ask you the questions that people are asking through the chat.
All right.
Okay. I mean, I understood everything, so it's fine.
Yeah, so be careful. Michael understands a lot of languages, so maybe he understands Dutch too. So no worry about that. So Michael, thank you very much for making time for us. Thank you very much for being here. Maybe a very short introduction about yourself, a couple of minutes, and then I'm doing my introduction, and then you can interrupt me if I'm telling things which are not right, or you can add some extra information. So, Michael.
Yeah, well, hello, everybody, again. It's always a unique pleasure to see that everybody makes it on time. I guess it's this Flemish, this Belgian, this Dutch proper education that you don't see in Russia anymore. And, well, on my side, you can say I manage our family's winery right now. It was founded by my father about 15 years ago. And I started basically marketing, and I eventually basically built my way through all the way to production. And now, since basically 2018, I take care of the whole cycle. So the wines, many of the wines we'll be tasting, some of them were made by people that were not under my involvement. So I wasn't involved in those wines in the production level. And some of them are already made by me. So now I take care of all of the elements involved in the production. And So I can answer some questions, but I guess some of the other questions I'm going to have to dodge in any way, and don't take it in some sort of negative way. I can definitely refer and find out more, if anything. We are, I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about us, but in generally about...
Let's wait for that maybe, Michael, because I'm going to do a small introduction about Russia.
Okay. So I'll pass the microphone to you then.
Yeah, I'm going to situate a little bit the whole scene of Russia, and if you can add stuff which you think it's important, so please jump in and add some extra information for the customers or for the people who are attending. So like people know, I always like to start with a mind map. So this time it's the same. Let's zoom in a bit. All right. It's always fun to know what happens if you Google or if you search in Wikipedia an area or a country like this. So just to give you an idea, Russia is the largest or the biggest country in the world. And let's jump in again to another screen. True size of. I like this side a lot because it gives you really an idea of how big Russia is. So if we zoom out and you go to the world, you see it is really the biggest country in the world. And if we take Belgium, I mean, not the smallest country in the world, but we are quite close, and you put it in Russia, it will be 560 times you can add Belgium into Russia. If you know the problems we have with our government and things like that in Belgium, and you multiply that with 560 times, I guess ruling a big country like Russia managed a lot of guts and a lot of, I don't know, courage. But okay, the second largest country in the world is Canada. And Canada has almost the half of size of Russia. So to give you just a situation about how big Russia is. Let's go back to my mind map, which is here. All right. So if you want people who love numbers, you have the numbers here, also the inhabitants. But Russia is about 1/8 of Earth's inhabited land. They have 11 time zones, which is the only country who has that. And surface of Russia is about the same, like we say, the planet of Pluto. I like that kind of facts. Moscow is the capital, and it's a large city in Europe. If you would love to take the longest highway, the longest railway, excuse me, in the world, we would take the Trans-Siberia Express. And if you start from Moscow, I guess it started, and it goes to Siberia, and you do the one road in one time, it will take you quite a couple of hours. So, and the crazy thing is that, you know, in Moscow, the biggest McDonald's in the world is in Moscow. It's a little bit contradictory because McDonald's is an American chain, and they have the biggest one is situated in Russia and Moscow, and they can seat 700 people. So quite a lot of hamburgers made over there. But okay, history. Let's go to the serious part. It's quite a lot, but I'm going to jump in. I'm going to highlight some things. So maybe in the 17th century, Peter de Grote, let's call it in Dutch, was the one who traveled beyond the frontiers of the Empire Russia. And which means that he saw a lot of things, also wine production. And let's say it is like the start of the wine production in Russia on an industrial scale. Afterwards, let's see what's maybe important. Maybe here, let's say it was sparkling wine, which were made, and they won a gold medal in Paris, which was like a highlight in winemaking, in history of winemaking in Russia. Braudoso, Massandra, Novi Sveta, they are famous and big companies in the Russian Empire. Tsar Alexander II die voerde, I'm going to do in Dutch and English at the same time, but he started with French techniques, but it was not a big success because the Russian, they wanted a half suite of kind of stuff. So French style was too sour, too dry actually for the Russian people in general. Then 20th century, we had Stalin, which was from had Georgian roots, which also means, and this time I guess it was that Georgia was seen as the country who delivered wine to Russia, and Armenia was seen as the country who made or who delivered, like say, cognac kind of stuff, the cognac to Russia. So that's where they had a stamp of, okay, Georgia makes wine for us, and Armenia makes cognac for us. All right. And Soviet time, they were really high on volumes and production, and if we look in the world about wine production. But then the period of Gorbachev, a lot of people under us remember Gorbachev. So he was against alcohol. He also, it was the end of the USSR. And since then, because he was against alcohol, he stopped a lot of vineyards. Dus heel wat wijngaarden heeft hij gestopt. Verbannen eigenlijk. Dat waren grote bedrijven die miljoenen flessen mikken. In het einde van communisme. Lage kwaliteit, volume. Hij heeft heel wat van die dingen gesloten. En sinds daarna, laat dat zeggen, begin in de jaren 2000, so it's the beginning of the 2000s, it starts really de privatisering, ik ga het in het Nederlands zeggen, dat zal makkelijker zijn, maar de privatisering eigenlijk van de wijnbouw in Rusland. En eigenlijk moet je zeggen, vanaf 2003, want de oudste wijngaard die ik ken, die kwaliteitswijnbouw doet, was aangeplant of is aangeplant in 2003. Dus eigenlijk allemaal heel jonge wijngaarden. Dus op vandaag, today we have what's important here, but they also can import grapes, which is not so important because really for high volume wines, but this is not the thing that I'm interested in or what I'm going to talk about. This is really for the local market, because it's a new technology, a new country, let's call it like that. They use modern technologies. Everything is started from scratch to make high quality wines with the knowledge which have today. That's also very important. Almost only Russian investments, because like we know that always all the same as in Belgium. If you want to start something, the bureaucracy is huge, and in Russia it is even worse. So you need a lot of patience and a lot of paperwork to do if you want to start something, which discourage international investments. Okay, but I guess today the numbers, Michael, because it's difficult to find really recent numbers. I guess when we talk about wine and wine production, it's go really fast. It's climbing up, I guess, because a lot of new wine producers, new wine companies are starting and having an influence on these numbers, I guess.
Well, if it says that there are 210,000 hectares, that's pretty much a lie. The official figure is about 80,000. That's official. And the real figure is about 47,000, because many of the hectares that are officially there, the vines are in a state that you would not consider them a real vineyard. So the 2010 it's a figure that they are trying to get to. So you might have read it in the wrong context.
Okay.
They know that about 210/250 is the amount that they want to get to in order to satisfy local demand. So one important thing to note about Russian wine production is that local demand is so intense, or it's so big, let's put it that way, that it's not very interesting for a Russian producer to export, because the market is not saturated. And therefore, we estimate that we'll need about 3, maybe 4 times more vineyards than now in order to satisfy local demand.
Okay, cool. So, like Michael said, it's not easy to find really good numbers or
it's like China. So forget about any numbers. You have to understand that the numbers are there, but there's a translation, I guess, barrier that is important. The official number is 80,000 at this point. So basically the same amount of vineyards that New Zealand has.
Okay. Perfect. As we talk about climate, but maybe when we zoom in then to where Michael is situated, but he has a continental climate, which means they have hard winters. But we will talk about that later on. Qua situation, and then maybe I go to a map, which will show it even better. Everybody has this in his box. This is something which is really interesting to show. What is important here to know that we have three very important facts, which if you know the three facts that you will say, okay, so it's normal that they can make very good wine in Russia. So one of the first facts is the wine belt. If you see where Bordeaux is situated, and then you go more to the right, then you have north of Italy, also famous for good wines, of course. When we go further on, then we go into the Black Sea, through the Black Sea, and we are here in the wine regions of Russia. So the situation on the earth, let's call it, is very, very, very good. So perfect. Second, terroir. Here we have the start of the Caucasian mountains. And really, you will see some pictures later on, but you can see really all hills are creating. So the beginning of the Caucasian, which means that old soils, because of when you make, and then you need to see me when I explain it. So if you have the old soils, which are the layers of the soils, which are pushing against to each other to create the Caucasian, the beginning of the Caucasian, you have on a short distance very different and very complex soils, which is like a dream for every winemaker. So ideal qua terroir. So with a French guy saying terroir, you can be sure that in Russia they have very good terroir too. And the third one is the history. If you look on the other side of the Caucasian, which is Georgia and Armenia, this is the cradle of wine. So here is the beginning of, here's the history of the wine world. They have found a cave in Armenia, which proves that 6,200 years ago, there was a wine production on a large scale. So this is actually one of the oldest discoveries that they did in the world about wine. So today we need to say that this is really the cradle of wine. So very close. So the Caucasian area, let's call it like this, is like the cradle of wine. So 1, 2, 3, three very important facts about Russia, which are showing really the logic that they can make really good wines over there. So
Dimitri, ik ga even toelichten. Ik heb iemand in een chat die vlug heeft opgezocht wat de oppervlaktes zijn aan hectares volgens de Adelaide University. Dus dat klopt een beetje met wat Michael zegt. Dat is nog iets minder, dus ondertussen zal het wel toegenomen zijn. Want we spreken over de cijfers van 2016. En dan zie je voor rode variëteiten, witte variëteiten, grey varieties, zie je ongeveer samen een 51.000 hectare. Dus dat is 2016. Dus dat zal kloppen dat we dan ergens zitten rond de 75.000 voor het moment. En gewoon even qua vertaling, het interessante dat Dimitri daarnet vertelt over die terroir, is dus effectief met de verschillende grondlagen, laten we zeggen. En als je dan gebergtevorming krijgt, dan krijg je dat die horizontale grondlagen zo verticaal beginnen komen, bij wijze van spreken, om u zeer plastisch te tonen. En dat je dus op korte afstand eigenlijk verschillende terroirs hebt. Wat het heel leuk maakt, en dat is ook hetgeen dat we gezien hebben in Rusland, dat ze dus zeer veel op een goede manier aan het experimenteren zijn van welke druiven passen het best op welk stuk land, op welke terroir. Dus ze kunnen echt zeer veel gaan uitproberen en dat maakt het uitermate boeiend. Dus voilà, even toelichting. Oké.
Dank u wel, Hans. Okay, so if we talk about the grapes, there's much more than this that I'm just showing, but it's always nice to show some maybe grapes which are less known for us, let's call it like that, for the international market. The grapes that we are going to taste tonight are mostly known grapes, but more about that when we're tasting the grapes. For example, a famous one in red is Krasnostop. That's quite famous. Saperavi, maybe you know Saperavi already. But in white we have Rekatsateli, which is quite common. Mitzvani, which is not on the list now, but which is always one, also one which is on the grapes. But because it's quite new, they really are definitely Michael of Lefkadia is they are at the beginning, they really tested a lot of grapes to see what gives the good quality that they want. And qua law, a lot of things are changed too. So they have a PDO system and an appellatie system where, for example, Lefkadia is a PDO. But we go into that. Maybe Michael can explain more about this subject. But maybe I give the stage to Michael because he can explain much more better than I do about Lefkadia, the start, and all the rest. So Michael, thank you very much for being here and looking forward to what you're going to say.
Yeah, thanks again. Well, I don't know if you'd like a presentation maybe with some pictures, but I guess that Dimitri has a few pictures of what it looks like. To be honest, vineyard pictures are very similar, in my opinion, anywhere around the world, almost anywhere. So there's recognizable images in South Africa. There are recognizable images in a few terroirs, but generally we're looking at hills. We're looking at a climate that is very similar to the wine producing regions that are most known around the world, both in the old and the new world. And the area of Russia that I would say has the most interesting terroirs is very recognizable in terms of images to any consumer, to any professional who has been to any wine producing area around the world. But going back to our story, so Dimitri talks about the location of the vineyards in Russia. I would generally say there are about 4 main regions or 4 main climates that have vineyards. One of them, and that is the oldest Russian wine producing region, is the Don region. It's located around the Don River, much further north from the Caucasus, about 1,000 kilometers north of the Caucasus. And it was the first area to produce wine in Russia under Peter the Great, because it was the first area that the Russians conquered. Let's be honest, Russia is an empire and it was moving south. And the first area that it occupied was the Don area. And it's an area that can bear grapes. There's a microclimate around a lake called the Tsimlansky Lake. Famous wines from that area include the sparkling wines made in an ancestral method. So it's called a petnat for the fancy, I guess, fashionable kind, but it's an ancestral method of red sparkling wines that are usually semi-dry or semi-sweet. And the Tsimlansky Lake has a microclimate where you can actually grow grapes without having to cover them in the winter. I don't know if you can maybe Google that area. It's a little further north from Rostov. You go up the river, down on the northeast. No, it's further up. It's like a 3-hour ride from Rostov, actually. Okay. Yeah, so it's not that close. And so the Tsimlansky Lake is the first area to actually make Russian wine. And there are a few varieties that come from the area. This is already Ukraine. One of the most important varieties is Tsimlansky Chorny, which translates as black. This is it. You see this big lake, and right now, just right here, Tsimlanskoye Vodokhraniliще. This is this big lake right in the middle of the picture is an area that has a microclimate because there's a large body of water, and around that, vineyards don't freeze in the winter, and therefore they can actually be cultivated in a classical manner. And this area has the most, well, the largest amount of Russian autochthonous varieties. Krasnostov, I don't know if you heard me, Krasnostop, with a stop at the end. Цемлянский черный, Цемлянский black, Sibirikovy, which smells a lot like marijuana because it's the same compound as cannabis. You have varieties like Puchlyakovsky and others that it's hard to remember, but generally this is the area where most of the autochthonous varieties that are specifically Russian come from. And again, it's an area that is quite far from the Caucasus. The Don area, again, one of the big macro regions. Another macro region is Dagestan. So Dagestan is a autonomous republic. It's part of Russia. It's where most of the rekatsateli that is grown in Russia is located. So right here on the Caspian Sea. And Dagestan, right now, it is not a producer of high quality wines, but I think it has the potential. Historically, Chechnya, or Chechnya, I don't know how you call it in Belgium, also used to produce wines, but because of the new Islamic laws, they've gotten rid of all the vineyards, but it's also an area with a lot of potential. Because they're closer to the Caspian Sea, the climate is milder, and there are large wine producing areas that mostly are used for the production of brandy. So for still wines and for sparkling wines, it's less known. Don, Dagestan, and then we go to the Black Sea. The Black Sea has, in my opinion, two different climatic regions. One is the seaside, which encompasses all of the areas that are close to the sea. We see Novorossiysk or Gelendzhik or Sebastopol. So basically the Crimean southern coast, and you continue all the way to the southern coast of the Krasnodar region. It is a climate that is very, very Mediterranean, very hot. You could even say, as a comparison, that it's similar to southern Rhone in terms of heat, in terms of water stress. So the best varieties for this area are Syrah, Vermentino. There's very few autochthonous varieties outside of the varieties found in Crimea, such as Kefesia or Kokur. Those are varieties that have a Greek origin, and they are adapted to these hot and dry summers. Again, that's the seaside area. And then you have the mountainside. So in Crimea, in the mountains, and also in the mountains around Krasnodar, you have a climate that is very different, despite the fact that it is geographically close to the sea, but factually, because it is affected by the cold steppe that is on the northeast, right here, as you can see on the map. Basically, if you're on the mountain, you can see the flat land that stretches for thousands of miles, and therefore you're constantly being stressed by the continental climate that comes from the flatlands, and this creates a sort of you could say it a high altitude effect, in the sense you have very cold winters, you have a high temperature gradient, so it can be very cold in the night and very hot during the day. And the vineyards in the mountainside are going to be considerably more they're going to be considerably higher in acidity. They're going to be much more fresh. It's like having a high altitude vineyard, despite the fact that the altitudes are not very considerable. So it's about 200 meters above sea level, and it's the same as having a vineyard 1,000 meters above sea level in the Mediterranean. So four macro climatic regions: the Don area, Dagestan, seaside, and mountainside, Black Sea. So four areas. Within that, we in Lefkadia are located on the mountainsides. Right here on you can see the red, the pointer. It's on the northern slopes of the Caucasus, so we don't have the effect, the mellowing, the milding effect that you get from the sea. very high temperature gradients. So there could be about 20 to 22 degrees in difference between night and day during the summer. And definitely the wines are going to be very different from those that are made on the southern slopes of the Caucasus, closer to the sea. There are a few producers that are close to us. I think that Dimitri has brought a few of them as well. And in my opinion, it is an area that is more suited for wines that have a naturally higher acidity. So wines that are fresher, wines that are more gastronomic, than the area that is closer to the sea that has much more full-bodied, ripe fruit styles of wines.
Sorry to interrupt you, Michael, but this is like we talked about. So this is the mountains. So you are on the north side of the Caucasian mountains, let's say the beginning of the Caucasian. And how much wineries are there on the north side in total?
Well, you know, the funny thing, it's actually kind of hard to know, because there are wineries that have been legalized because they got a license, and there are producers that are still semi-legal. But within our county, there are about only 7 wineries right now. 6 of them are in, there are 8 wineries, sorry. 6 of them are in Lefkadia Valley. There's one that is right on the edge, further south, and there's one that is a bit further west. So there's very few wineries, because most of the investors that actually invest in vineyards and wineries, they want something closer to the sea because it's more romantic. There are very few professional wine investors, and it's normal for a country that is so young in terms of winemaking. Well, born again, you could say it that way. Therefore, there are very few investments in terms of quality terroir. Right now, most of the wineries that are being opened are close to Anapa, which is on the seaside.
I have an idea how far is this from the sea? Straight like this?
It's about 70 kilometers, I think.
70, okay.
So it's very close. Just on a straight level, it's very close. But physically, when you come there, you can see that it's very different. The plants that grow around, the amount of water that we get, the frost stress, it is very, very different, because these mountains are the only thing that protects the seaside areas from the steppe. The steppe is a completely different climate, and we get much harsher winters. We get much more water, so much more rain. And you can see it from the forests. We have oak forests mostly, and poplar forests, one on the seaside. Even on Google Earth, you can see it on the seaside. It's a much more Mediterranean sort of nature, put it that way.
Yeah.
And that's very important when you taste the wine. So we're gonna be similar, I guess, to the mountain terroirs of Europe. I think that even the sparkling wines, the white wines especially, and also the red wines, are similar to Trentino, for example, in Italy. They are not similar to, I don't know, Maremma. Very, very different in terms of the heat and in terms of the acidity that you can get from the grapes there.
Okay, thanks, Michael. I will just do a little translation, not too much. Maar ik denk dat het belangrijkste punt dat we gehoord hebben van Michael is eigenlijk het feit dat Lefkadia gelegen is op de noordelijke hellingen van het begin van de Caucasus. Als je dat vergelijkt met de regio aan de kust, dan krijg je echt wel een groot verschil. In die zin dat aan de kust dat je meer over wat meer tropisch naar smaak toe, wat meer de tropische fruit. Dus je krijgt sowieso wat hogere temperaturen daar. De Lefkadia die aan de noordelijke slopes, of de noordelijke hellingen zit van het begin van de Caucasus, daar is er sowieso wat meer water. Ook wat hardere winters. Maar wat ook wel maakt, want je zit altijd met dat temperatuurverschil, dag en nacht, die het heel goed afrijpen van de druiven bevordert. Dat ga je ook wel merken, bijvoorbeeld de Cabernet Franc bijvoorbeeld, rijpt daar perfect af. Cabernet Franc heeft dat ook nodig. En daar krijg je dus wat meer die aciditeit, dus die elegantie. Er was iemand die mij op voorhand gevraagd heeft, dus ik geef het gewoon even mee. Als je kijkt naar alcoholpercentages van de wijnen die we gaan proeven vanavond, de witte, de eerste zit op 13, de tweede op 14. En als je de alcoholgehaltes bekijkt van de rode wijnen, dan zitten die ongeveer allemaal op 14. De eerste 13,5, dan 14, 14,5, 14. Dus laten we zeggen, gemiddeld zitten ze op 14%. Maar iedere keer met die elegantie, precies door het feit dat er daar wat meer dag- en nachtverschil is, dat er daar ook wat strengere winters zijn. Dus je hebt eigenlijk een ander klimaat dan de wijngaarden die gelegen zijn, meer aan de kust. En zoals dat Michael het beschrijft, je hebt een aantal wijngaarden die gelegaliseerd zijn, laten we zeggen. Je spreekt over een 8-tal. En dan heb je dus een aantal die eigenlijk nog een beetje in de grijze zone zitten en nog geen echte licentie hebben. Maar dus de gelegaliseerde spreken we over een 8-tal domeinen. Oké, thank you, Michael.
If we talk about, because if we think about Russia and we talk about winters, we always thinking it's going to a lot of snow and very cold. So if you talk about temperatures, like in your region, in comparison, for example, with on the other side of the Caucasian, can we compare this in the climate a little bit?
Well, we can get the maximum frost that we got in 2015, for example, was -26. And that is a freak frost. Mostly we don't get lower than -14. So this year, the minimum was -4. They never get freak frosts on the other side. So they can get -4, maybe 0, but it's never going to be lower than -14 ever. And that is basically the main difference, because any vineyard can bear the stress of -14. When you go lower, that's when you have a problem. And this is not an area that gets any snow, so there's no snowfall. If there is snow, for example, we got 9 snowfalls this winter, but none of them lasted more than a day. So it's beautiful, it's really heavy and lush snow, but it only lasts a day, because this is not an area with constant frost. It's an area that gets freak frosts. On the other side, they never get anything. Maybe you can get snow, but you can get snow in Barcelona as well. It's not a normal phenomenon in that sense. So the frost effect is one of the main, I guess, differences between our area and the area closer to the sea, which never sees any frost. Another effect is obviously spring frost. So something that in Europe this year has been a big problem. So far, and I think we're done with it. We didn't have any spring frost this year, but generally we get the same spring frost risks as, for example, Chablis. Very often, 1 in 3 years, you can have a spring frost risk, and we lose about 15 to 20% of our grapes to spring frost. So that is a problem that exists in our area, and it doesn't exist at all in the area on the other side of the Caucasus. So they're very close, but they're very different in reality, despite the similarities geographically.
And in summer?
Summer, the heat is very similar. So we're on the same level, so we get the same amount of sun. We are a little bit more humid. They're a little bit more dry, generally. So for example, we don't have any vineyards that have irrigation, but I would say that any vineyard that you plant south of the Caucasus, so in this area, has to have irrigation. Otherwise, it's going to have a serious risk of water stress. We don't have that. We get about 500 millimeters a year, which is the frontier for irrigation or not irrigation. So last year we did have a bit of a drought, about 450, but it's not a normal year, and they get droughts every year. And so that's a big difference. In terms of actual heat, we can get very similar numbers. So our maximum was 44. I think that was in 2016 or 2017. And the CSAT gets the same, but it's not the actual heat that is more important. I think it's the water stress that is more important in the summer.
Okay. Maybe we should start the first wine, because I think everybody is thirsty.
Let's go.
First wine is, so everybody had, Michael, just so you know, everybody had a list of all the wines which are in our portfolio, of your wines, of course, not of the rest, so they don't know what I'm doing else in Russia. But the first one is the Lefkadia Sauvignon met Zwanen from 2019. Just to give a short resume to the people. Onze 4e container is net aangekomen en dit is dus een nieuwe vintage die daarop zat. We hebben nog een heel klein beetje 2018. Dit is nu 19 dat we proeven, dus de nieuwe jaargang die binnen is. So Sauvignon met Zwanen. Everybody knows Sauvignon, but met Zwanen, Michael, what's that?
Well, this wine, 2019 was a very, very hot year. Not a great year for Sauvignon, I'll be honest, because 2018 was a great year for Sauvignon. And I think if you remember the Sauvignon Zwanen, very aromatic, very, very open, very easy. 2019 is very closed, and the Sauvignons were less aromatic. They were more herbaceous in character. And there's a bit of Sauvignon Gris in the mix, about 6%. Not very important and not critical, but we do add it during the years that are hotter. We try to add a little bit more Sauvignon Gris. It performs a little better in the more complicated years. Zwanen is a variety that comes from, well, there's 2 types of Zwanen. Zwanen means green in Georgian, so it's the very green grape when you see it physically. And it's a grape variety that comes from Georgia, but you can say it's Caucasian because the Georgians, even though they say that Zwanen is very, very autochthonous, they don't quite know exactly where Zwanen comes from in Georgia. There are at least 2 varieties. So there's Gorulim Zwanen and another Zwanen. Basically, there's a Zwanen that comes from the mountains in Kajetia. There's a Zwanen that comes from Imeretia. So it's a very, well, you could say it's a common variety in Georgia. In terms of its character, it is very light because it has a bit of a floral character, a bit of a herbaceous character, similar to Sauvignon, but without the aromatics of a modern Sauvignon clone. Sorry, that's the big problem. I think that the clonal selection in Georgia is not up to par, and therefore Zwanen it's hard to find. We have 2 types of Zwanen planted in Lefkadia Valley. One was part of an experimental vineyard where we bought the Zwanen from a French nursery that had selected it many years ago. And the other one was from a nursery in Georgia. It's the national nursery of Georgia. It was gifted by a Georgian oligarch to the country, and they're different. The leaves are different as well. So they're definitely different varieties, but the Georgians don't know how to call them. So they just call them Zwanen green. Again, very floral in the mix. So in the blend, it actually it never makes more than 15%, mostly because the evolution of Zwanen is less interesting, in my opinion, than the evolution of Sauvignon Blanc because of the selection process. But it gives more body. It gives a sort of a tropical, I guess, maybe of a pineapple element to the blend, especially when the wine breathes or it ages. Right now, as I said, 2019 is very closed, and it needs a long time to breathe in order to actually get the aromatics that are inherent in this wine. And we did it actually, if you remember, I started making this wine as a sort of challenge, I guess, because it's very hard to do something new in Sauvignon. And we in Lefkadia are basically the Sauvignon country of Russia. All of the neighbors have Sauvignon Blanc planted, and we make all kinds of Sauvignon, like wild fermented, oak aged, amphora fermented. I don't know. We make Sauvignon Pet Ancestral. We make all sorts of different sparkling Sauvignons. So it's Sauvignon land for Russia because we are the only area that can produce very fresh, naturally high acidic Sauvignon, because we pick much later. We have much longer growing season than anywhere else in the country. And basically, knowing that in Russia we have a competitive advantage globally, obviously Sauvignon is already a very known variety, and I wanted to do something new, something with an autochthonous variety from the Caucasian area, and with a bit of a twist, I guess. It's heavier, definitely has more body because it comes from the Zwanen element. it evolves in a much more floral way. So we can get, I guess, an old Sauvignon Blanc Svanne. It seems a little bit similar to a Loire style Sancerre maybe wine with a bit of a cat element to it as well. And I think that it's a cool way of finding out a different type of Sauvignon blend. I guess maybe I was inspired by the Greeks who make a Sirtico or Moscatel blend with Sauvignon. And I want to do something similar along those lines.
Yeah, I like the wine a lot. It's a big difference between 2018, if you like more the New Zealand kind of Sauvignon style. And I guess you would go for the 18. If you like the really clean, fresh, straightforward style, then you really like this one, 19. So two different styles.
Yeah, I mean, 19 was very different. It takes a lot longer to open up, but I think that's going to be very important in terms of its aging potential. And in terms of the way that a wine evolves, if you have it, for example, by the glass, you can keep it open for much longer because it's much less straightforward. It's a different take on that.
Yeah. So this is maybe to point a little bit the range. So we have from the Lefkadia, we have Liguria, and we have Lefkadia on the list, but we also have Bachelor. So we have three different ranges.
Well, the main idea is that Lefkadia was the brand that my father created, and those are vineyards located on clay soils or heavy soils, much more extractive, much heavier, I guess, much more new world in terms of style, if that's the way to put it. And Liguria comes from the vineyards that are on marl and limestone soils, mostly marl, and right now exclusively marl, actually right now, since 2018, since I took over. And they're much less extractive, much less tannic in terms of red, and they're going to be much more aromatic, much more mineral. Even you can see that salinity in it in terms of the whites. They're a little bit salty as well. And that is, Liguria is our kind of, some people see it as a junior brand because it's cheaper, but in reality, it's cheaper because we make more of it, because we have more vineyards in the marl area than we do in the clay area. So that's the way we see them as more ready to drink because they're much less, I guess, heavy when they come out as grapes.
Michael, I just got a question, but before I have someone who gave the comment just before you did that there is some salinity in the finish, and he likes it very much. So that's exactly what you explained. Someone is asking if you can tell us what is the meaning of the words Lefkadia and Liguria.
Well, Lefkadia actually, the area where we make wine, so Lefkadia Valley PDO, it's an area that was a winemaking area in ancient times. So we know that there were Greek colonists who used to make wine here about 2,500 years ago in the 6th century before Christ. This was the frontier between the Sarmatians and the Scythians and the Greek world. So as any frontier town, it was very much a trading post, and the Greeks were very good at exporting wine and olive oil and exchanging them for gold and other things. So as the Greeks were very smart, they knew that it's better to produce the wine locally than to import it from Greece and sell it to the locals. So this was a very big wine producing area. It was so big that in Roman times, it actually started to export back to Rome and Greece. And there's a lot of shipwrecks that find amphoras with wines that were meant to be drunk in Rome and Greece. And we wanted to get back to that story. And Lefkadia actually means the land of the white poplar in Pontic Greek, so in ancient Greek, put it that way. But it's not ancient Greek, it's the Greek that the local Greek settlers speak. So there's still a Greek population in this area, and they speak a dialect of Greek that is no longer used in Greece. And therefore, their meanings are a little different. In their language, in their Greek version, and put it that way, Lefkadia means the land of the white poplar, and there's a lot of white poplar trees in this valley. So that was the original intent. Later, we found out that Lefkadia actually means the land of white wine, because the Greeks usually say lefkos for white in terms of wine. And it just so happens that we, as a PDO, mostly have white varieties, and most of us produce white wine and sparkling wine. So therefore, it's a white wine land in Russia.
Okay, great. We talked about Likuria, we talked about Lefkadia. Maybe it's a
Yeah, Likuria, sorry. Likuria just means, it comes from the Russian word likavat, which means to have fun. And we, again, going back to the Greek story, we just want to have a word that's sort of like a feast wine, let's put it that way. So it's a festival wine, Likuria, that's where it comes from.
Yeah, don't talk about festivals now, because we cannot visit a festival. Everybody wants to go.
In Russia, it's open, so it's all fine.
Okay, everybody goes to Russia now. But the next one, the Lefkadia Reserve White. So this is really interesting to really see the style difference. And yeah, this is, so the first one was 2019, which I said, and the second one is 16. So which is the Cuvée Prestige of the Lefkadia range.
Well, yeah, the Cuvée Prestige is a very good way of defining it, because it's not the top wine, and it was never meant to be the top wine, but it is the wine that, in my father's opinion, it's his favorite wine, let's put it that way. So it's his top wine. And when he founded the winery, when he founded the brand, the winemaker for all of these wines was Patrick Leon. I don't know if Dimitri talked a little bit about it. So Patrick Leon of the Rothschild family fame, who was the head winemaker for Mouton Rothschild and Opus One and Alma Viva. He worked with us for 10 years after he retired from Mouton. And Patrick, every year he made a different blend for the Lefkadia Reserve. He was the head winemaker. He was basically the guy who set it all up. And even though the red is a very different Bordeaux blend every year, the white has always stayed a mostly Rhone variety blend, because my father and I think the local climate, they prefer the Rhone varieties if you want to make an age-worthy wine. And this 2016 is maybe the exception out of all of them. And this is the last wine we ever made under the Lefkadia Reserve name, because after Patrick passed away in 2018, we decided to no longer make Lefkadia Reserve, because I cannot make it, I'm not Patrick Leon, and we can't just throw around names. So this is the last vintage. These are the last bottles as an homage, as a remembrance of Patrick, who was a great winemaker. Even though some of us might not like Mouton or Opus One, I think that nonetheless Patrick had a very big effect on global winemaking. And this is his version of a white age-worthy blend. Roussanne, Marsanne, Viognier, and Chardonnay. This is the only vintage with Chardonnay in it. These have been in French oak barrels at 228 for about 8 months, fermented and aged. And this is let's put it that way, his version of the Hermitage sort of style that is very, very important for us in our area.
Yeah, it is really, like you said, it is an homage, first one, and second, it is a Côte d'Ivoire style, an Hermitage style, which really opens in your glass. So this is really an interesting wine to really keep in your glass and see how it develops, how it opens
it's
up.
It's drinking nicely now. It wasn't drinking as well a couple of years ago. It's drinking nice now, I think. Hopefully everybody got a good bottle of it. And really, those were the last bottles that we had left. And to me, definitely a wine that can be enjoyed universally. So it's a very, very, people who like Chardonnay, because it has a high percent of Chardonnay. It has that element, that acidity. And those who like more of a honeyed and herbaceous style, it has those from Marsanne and Roussanne as well.
Ja, maar het is zo een delicate stijl, weet je wel. Het is not in your face. It's really on the elegance. delicate.
The old man was like that. I mean, Patrick was like that, and he was not in your face. He was always very accepting and very delicate about everything that he did. And the wines definitely show that sort of element from him. That's one of the reasons why I made the Bachelor collection, because I wanted to make wines as a young man. I wanted to make wines that are very against that sort of delicacy. And maybe I was wrong, so therefore, I mean, the Bachelor collection. These are the last vintages as well, because I've changed now. I have 2 kids, and things change as well. But definitely, Patrick was a very delicate, very educated, and very, very smart man in that sense. Never made anything too loud.
Even voor de vertaling, dus Patrick Léon was de hoofdwijnmaker van Mouton Rothschild. Heeft een paar jaar erover gedaan om te beslissen of dat hij ging meewerken op Lefkadia. Heeft dat uiteindelijk toegezegd, want hij wou, als zijn naam eronder geschreven werd, dan wou hij dat het eigenlijk allemaal correct was, en dat was het ook. Dus hij heeft daar x aantal jaren mee geholpen. Dus de tweede wijn dat we proeven, de Lefkadia Reserve White, is dus eigenlijk, het zijn de laatste flessen. Dus omdat Patrick Léon is gestorven, ik dacht eind 2017 of begin 2018.
Eind 18.
Eind 18? Eind 17 dacht ik, ja.
Eind 18.
Eind 18, oké. Net voordat we de eerste persconferentie gedaan hebben over de eerste container Russische wijn die er was. En ja, dit is zo'n beetje zijn visitekaartje natuurlijk. Hè. Dus je merkt inderdaad de elegantie, je merkt de complexiteit. Maar ja, Michael heeft dus beslist van deze nieuwe te maken. Hij zegt ook van, ik ben niet Patrick Léon. Dit is een beetje het visitekaartje van Patrick Léon. Die is er nu niet meer, dus dan gaan we daar ook mee stoppen. Maar ook omdat hij, zoals dat hij zegt, verder evolueert, laat ons zeggen. Dus hij had de Bachelor-collectie. Daar gaat hij ook mee stoppen, want hij is geen bachelor meer, hij is geen vrijgezel meer, hij is nu gelukkig getrouwd en heeft kinderen. Dus hij zegt, iedereen evolueert in het leven en ook de wijnen evolueren in het leven. Dus dat is een mooi gezegde. Thanks.
Maybe it's time to zoom in a little bit more on Google Earth, because we had a situation on the planet, but if we go much more closer, oh, look there. This is Lefkadia. How can I say, this is the restaurant, and can you explain more what we see, Michael? This is the thing you made.
Yeah, the amphitheater. So we really want to reopen the whole ancient historical style of wines, and we're building, I guess you can say, in terms of functionality, we're building a touristic complex that is a reconstruction of an ancient polis. So we have an arena, or not an arena, a theater, an agora, a forum where we host trade fairs, and there's a lot of winemakers that come by. And we actually, in this area, we have thermal waters. And in the restaurant, the water that you drink it comes from a source. It's a very, very good and limestone cleaned water, so therefore it's very healthy for you. And we open thermal baths in this location as well. So it's basically it sounds a little strange, but it's a reconstruction in terms of functionality of an ancient Roman or Greek town or center of town. We're also going to rebuild an ancient winery, because we've been working a lot with amphora wines, and right now we're basically switching a lot of the vineyards to amphora production. It's not very freaky in style, but it's nonetheless a rerun of the old ancient traditions. And this is right now the way that it looks. It's the touristic center where we host festivals and everything like that.
That's actually true, because you really did for tourism and really develop the area. And this is the entry actually where you come in, and then over there you have what we saw just so the building.
Yeah, the funny thing is because there's an army base pretty close by. There's always very fresh Google Earth pictures. So the Americans keep it very fresh in that sense, which is good for us as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite recent because I never saw here the arena, so that's quite new. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you zoom out further, the largest Russian Air Force base in the south is located pretty close by.
And it's here?
Yeah, right here, yeah. You can see fresh planes all the time. It's pretty cool.
Okay. Need to be a little competition between Russia and America now.
Yeah, but at least you get fresh, free Google Earth pictures all the time, so it's good.
Yeah. So, but just to give you a little bit situation to the customers, because this is really, so the entry we just saw, this is like you can organize a marketplace. So it was.
Yeah. Well, the main problem in Russia is that consumers don't have a chance to taste a lot of the wines because of the legal restrictions around selling wine. So you need a license to sell, you need a license to produce. And therefore, what we try to do is we have wine fairs where people can come in and they try garagist wines or small producer wines along with everything else. And this is the main center for that. And we really want to develop Lefkadia as a PDO. We actually are trying really hard for all of our neighbors to develop their own styles, and at the same time, in some sense, we want everybody to be different, but all of us have to be similar in some way. Otherwise, there's no Lefkadia Valley feeling to it. You know, you go to, I guess, the Montalcino, and you understand that everybody's working with Sangiovese, and it's going to be a little different, but it's also going to be a little similar. Right now in Russia, because there are no legal restrictions, I can plant anything. So, for example, I just planted Tempranillo about 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to plant some Albarino, and Dimitri is going to say that I'm crazy, but I like Tempranillo, but I can plant them and I can make a wine out of it, and there's nobody that can restrict me in any way from doing things like that. But at the same time, there's been a general, I guess, confluence. There's been a general decrease in the amount of varieties that we're planting, and we're making wines that are similar in style. And there's 4 different areas that actually unite us all. One of the areas are sparkling wines, and I know that you don't have sparkling wines in the tasting because it's very hard to ship sparkling wines. Another area is Sauvignon Blanc. As I said, all of us have Sauvignon Blanc, and we've been working with it in very different ways, but we're moving towards a closer understanding of that. Another area are Bordeaux blends, and you're going to have a couple Bordeaux blends in the tasting, I know, later. And another area are Caucasian varieties, because when people talk about Russian wine, they talk a lot about Krasnostop and things like that. So Dimitri had in his presentation all of these like Krasnostop and Semlyansky and Sibirikove. Those are varieties that come from the Don area, but they are not autochthonous to the Black Sea coast or to Dagestan. And it's, you know, with anything in life, because the head of the Association of Winemakers for 10 years was from the Don area, all he did was promote Don area varieties. And every time they go to a wine fair, that's what they would show. Every time they go to wine tasting abroad, they would show Don area varieties as Russian varieties. And to me, that's a big problem, because those are not very interesting. And they're especially less interesting in our location. It's too sunny and they get too much alcohol. So Krasnostop to me is definitely not interesting for the Caucasian area. It's good for the Don area, but again, not for us. So things are changing now, because the new story is less centered around autochthonous varieties and is more centered around terroir. So we're finally starting to talk about mountainside, seaside, blends. In Russia, because of the climate, blends are going to be much more important over time. So most of the good Russian wines you're going to find, in my opinion, are going to be blended wines, because the climate is very different from year to year. and the blends, they allow you to make something that is much more recognizable, much better over time, much more stable in terms of taste and style. And I think that we'll see many more blended wines that come from Russia, and those are going to be, they're going to have to accept that. Monovarietal wines, that's not something that is easy to do in Russia.
Just to show the picture, just to give you an idea of how the view is over there. So it's really a magnificent view. This is a spot you really like to show when customers coming. This is one of the highest places, I guess, that we can get, or?
Yeah, this is called the Limestone Mountain because it's made out of limestone. They don't really kid around with names there. And they cut it in Soviet times, so it's a little shorter. They used to actually quarry limestone from it. And we have a couple vineyards on that mountain. And we're actually planting more and more, but we're planting things like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, which you might look at it as ridiculous, but for Russia, these are the only areas that we think are going to be worth it in terms of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir.
Yeah, but really, you never, nobody could imagine if you see this picture that this is Russia. Really, this is like you are in Italy. It's a very, very beautiful region to visit.
En gewoon even wat toelichting, dat is eigenlijk een beetje de rode draad doorheen het verhaal vandaag. Hè. Dus hetgeen dat we al zeiden was van, ze experimenteren op een goede manier, echt afhankelijk van de terroir. Ze hebben geen restricties, dus ze kunnen onteven wat aanplanten wat ze willen. En dat is ook hetgeen dat ze doen. Hetgeen dat we gezien hebben, dat amfitheater, daar is ook een Griekse tempel gebouwd. Dat reflecteert een beetje terug naar de vroegere periode. Eigenlijk een beetje het ontstaan wat Michael aangehaald heeft, hè, toen dat de Grieken er waren. Ze zijn ook de verschillende regio's meer en meer met elkaar in contact aan het brengen. Ook de lokale wijnmakers brengen ze met elkaar in contact, want vroeger was er niet echt de mogelijkheid om van alles te proeven. Dus vandaar dat hij ook een soort van marktplaats heeft gemaakt, waar dat er, ik dacht zelfs een wekelijkse of een maandelijkse markt is, en waar dat er dus ook dikwijls verschillende wijnboeren, collega's komen om wijnen te laten proeven. Dus het is jong, maar het zit in een ongelooflijke stroomversnelling. Zowel op vlak van experimenteren, ook met het wijnmaken zelf. Ik denk dat we straks waarschijnlijk, als Dimitri die toont, nog wat beelden zullen hebben over de winery zelf. Waar dat ze niet alleen met betonnen eieren, maar ook met hexagonale cuves werken. Met betonnen cuves, met amfores. Dus ze zijn op alle niveaus en op alle vlakken enorm dingen aan het uitproberen. Dus hij zegt ook dat van bijvoorbeeld Pinot Noir aan te planten. Hetgeen dat je daar zag als foto was de limestone hill. Dus de kalksteenheuvel die vroeger een stuk hoger was. Maar ze hebben kalksteen gewonnen, dus die heuvel is nu een beetje korter gemaakt. Maar daar gaan ze dus ook aanplant doen. Dus ja, gewoon, dat is de rode draad door het verhaal. Heel leuke, verrassende, boeiende dingen. Nog zeer jong, maar nu al ongelooflijk verrassend. En als ik zie op welke manier dat zij bezig zijn met interactie, maar ook met het wijnmaken zelf en de aanplant, dan is het alleen maar mooi naar de toekomst toe, zou ik zeggen.
Ja, en dat je rode draad zei, dat doet mij denken aan rode wijn. Hè? Een mooie overgang. Dus we gaan naar de eerste rode wijn gaan. Let's go to the first red wine, which is actually new in the range. For Start2Taste, is Saperavi. Carbonic Saperavi 2019.
Yeah, I was going to say, I heard Hans talk about Pinot, and I forgot to say a little thing that I think is going to be very important over the years. So I don't know if any of you have heard about Andrei Cheryshev. Cheryshev was the only winemaker from Russia, well, originally from Russia, that is famous globally. He emigrated after the First World War. He eventually ended up in the United States, and he was the teacher and the father of modern Napa Valley winemaking. He was the teacher that's the way to put it, the mentor for most of the winemakers that were in the 1976 Paris tasting. Patrick Leon was actually on that tasting as a judge. That's how they know each other. When Patrick came to Russia, he actually made a wine in honor of Andrei Cheryshev, because Cheryshev passed away in '94 and he never made it back. And when Patrick made a wine in honor of Andrei Chelychev, he actually made a blend of Pinot Noir, Syrah, and Cabernet Sauvignon. Something that's quite strange. I think nobody makes a Pinot Noir blend anywhere. And over the years, originally it sounded as a stupid idea, but over the years we found that actually it is something that potentially could be our face, a recognizable blend from Lefkadia Valley. Because Pinot is good, but it's probably not good enough to make it globally. And there's no great Pinot Noir, sadly, in my opinion, that can make it globally. Oregon is doing a great job. I mean, Russian River Valley is doing a great job. Sadly, we let that go many years ago. But other things like that. And we think that the Pinot Noir blend could potentially be Lefkadia's recognizable blend that will be important over the years, especially in connection with Chelychev, because when Patrick said that, well, if Chelychev came back to Russia, that's the blend that he would do. That's the one he would do. Going back to Saperavi, so this is our third year making Saperavi, and I tried everything. I mean, we did Qvevri, classics, barrel aged, barrel fermented, anything you want. I really don't like Saperavi. When Patrick and the French team selected Saperavi, I was not very much in favor of it. I think it's a variety that is very aggressive in terms of taste. You can always recognize it up front. And if you've been to Georgia, I'm sure you're going to agree with me that Saperavi, there are very few good Saperavis in Georgia. Mostly they're good when they get very old, and it's hard to find old Saperavi. And we tried everything. So I came up with these, well, not came up, but I found these French guys. We call them the alcoholic French guys. There's two friends that ended up in mountainside Georgia, and they were the first ones to try carbonic maceration for Saperavi that I know. And I really like their style. And we actually switched to that ourselves. And right now, our neighbors also switched to that in the Lefkadia Valley. So there are already two producers who make carbonic Saperavi. This is 100% carbonic maceration. So, 10%, well, basically the press wine was aged in Caucasian oak in order to make it more mellow. You can see the classical saltiness that you find in any Lefkadia Valley wine. They're all salty, and we don't know exactly why. There's a nice legend that says that the wines are salty because all of these lands actually are from a ancient sea floor, and you can find large mollusks. You can find large sea creatures in the vineyards, well, basically from a million years ago, but they're still there. Maybe the saltiness comes from there, because it definitely doesn't come from the sea, because we're too far away from the sea and there's a mountainside. Maybe it comes from that, but maybe it comes from something else. And this Saperavi is a little salty. There's a high
of the sea which in your vineyard was.
Yeah, this is the vineyard, and you can see that there's a lot of clay as well, and there's the salinity, there's the acidity that comes from actually not extracting as much. Obviously, the color is very dense because Saperavi in Georgian means paint. So it paints everything that you see. You'll paint your fingers. You'll paint your mouth as well. It's a very extractive variety in terms of color. And nonetheless, we try to make it as light as possible. I would say on the spicy side. To me, because I grew up in Spain, I really wanted to do something similar to the wines that they make in Tenerife. So it smells a little bit like a volcanic wine, to me at least. But it has that lightness that we're really trying hard to find in Saperavi, which is really, really, really hard because it's a very tannic, very heavy variety generally. That's a different take on Saperavi for us.
Yeah, someone is asking, the alcohol degree is 13.5. But I like really much the style. I'm not a big fan of Saperavi neither, but this is really something, yeah, this is really, really, really good made.
Yeah, generally Saperavi can get up to very high alcohol levels because we pick it ripe, and ripe means a lot of sugar for this variety. I mean, I don't know if you find it high or not. I grew up in Spain, so to me 15% is not a lot. Some people are very picky about it. We've managed to actually decrease the alcohol percentage over the years because we've switched to organics, and if you see the vineyards now, they're absolutely green. The water retention is different, and the works in the vineyards are different. So without adding water to the wine, we managed to lower by about 2% the alcohol content, which is a lot. For Sauvignon Blanc, for example, we started at 14.5 and we're at 12.5 right now for full ripeness. And for Cabernet Franc, we started about 15 and now we're about 13.5, which is a big feat for us, because you have to understand that despite the fact that Russia seems that it's very far in the north, in terms of climate, we're much more similar to a Mediterranean climate. So much more sun, much more heat, and therefore much more alcohol, much more sugar accumulation, much more alcohol. We're really trying hard to get that to a lower level. Yeah, our lowest level red this year was 11%, but that's more of an exception than a norm.
Very curious to the reaction. Ik ben heel benieuwd wat jullie ervan vinden. Zet het gewoon in de chat, want dit is dus nieuw in het gamma. Iets origineels. Ik ben fan, alleszins. So, very good. I like it a lot, Michael, this one. I just have a nice picture of, which I once asked you.
I mean, bottle to bottle, they're a little different because we don't filter them anymore. I mean, it's not legal in Russia. For example, it's not legal not to add sulfites. You have to add sulfites by law. And there are very few wines that actually we don't add. All of our wines are going to be under 30. So I actually had to double check recently because we had a big argument with a couple big sommeliers, but they're all under 30. So you could consider them low sulfite wines. Some of them, obviously the sweet wines are going to be over, but none of the ones that you're tasting today. I think you're not tasting the Sauvignon Blancs, we're going to be a little bit over as well. In terms of the wine itself, the bottles, every bottle is going to be a little bit different. I'll be honest with you. On the Saperavi, I've had bottles that were on the, I guess, the volcanic sort of spicy side, and bottles that were a little bit heavier. So that's the honest response here.
Okay. So we also have a nice visitor in the vineyard. The fox.
Yeah, that's basically the thing is there's a lot of hunters in the south of Russia, and because we've been protecting the vineyards, we have a new little ecosystem that grew rabbits and foxes and pheasants and deer as well. We even have boars, but we have to actually get rid of them. And in Russia, there's a very famous fable about a fox and his love for cheese. But actually, this very photogenic fox that we have, it hunts mice and it actually eats grapes. We don't kill it because obviously it's a great tourist trap. But outside of that, the grape eating is not good because we've been trying to get rid of the birds. I know that, for example, New Zealand has a big bird problem, and they actually covered the grapes and things like that in the States as well. In Russia, we hunt for the birds, but they're really sneaky and very smart, and they actually walk all the way to the vineyard. So you cannot catch them flying; you have to catch them walking. They do 250 meters, 300 meters walking. It's a very tough task to get rid of the birds and also any animals that like the grapes.
All right, let's go to the Likuria Red Reserve, which is 2016.
First of all, I will give some comments in the chat on the Saperavi. A lot of people like it, big fan, love the fruitiness, without being negative, the fruity side, the easy drinking side. Someone is telling it's too overwhelming, but a very nice aftertaste. and someone is telling it, it's giving me a nice warm feeling. Like this wine even more in winter, as he is saying. But in general, I have some very nice comments.
But let's be honest, let's not be too harsh. It's a 2019 red wine, so it's obviously very young. And I don't think that it's going to be a very mellow, in terms of tannins, wine when it's so young, especially with Sapirado.
Yeah, for his young age, it's already very nice elegance. You feel it's really ripe. Tannins are not green. It's going to have a nice potential for quite a while. And actually, like you said, Michael, it's going to be in a couple of years, it's going to be much more rounder. All right, let's go to the 16 Liguria Red Reserve, which is wine number 4.
Yeah, so Liguria, as I said, it comes from vineyards that are on marl soils. So there are soils that have a mix of limestone and clay. And mostly they make, you could say, lighter wines, if that's the way to put it. So mostly we don't use new oak on Liguria wines. We use old oak because we're very scared of actually getting that oaky feeling on the wines. And we want to keep the variety, well, the actual fruit as much as possible. So there's very little new oak. No, there's no new oak. There's very little oak in general on these wines. There's about 40% on the Liguria Reserve 2016. It's a very easy blend, easy to remember. Most of our blends are a little complicated. This is about 45% Cabernet Sauvignon with, I think, 30 Cabernet Franc and the rest in Syrah, or I might get that mistaken. It was a long time ago for me, at least, before my first kid. So it's basically a century ago. And the blend, I'd say, is a very Mediterranean blend. We have that Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon with Syrah. It's a spicy sort of version of a Bordeaux blend, and it's something that I think really showcases the Liguria brand, the concept in general, where it's a little bit on the, it's got that acidity. It's not really heavy in body. It's got that fruit, but the fruit is not very ripe. It's not very extracted. It's more on the earthy side. Maybe it reminds a lot of people that I've talked to, it reminds a lot of Italian wines, maybe even Bulgari wines, but without that oak component that you see in a lot of Bulgari wines. And definitely a lot of sun, so relatively high alcohol content. But if you have the opportunity to actually decant this, if you have the opportunity to actually give this some air, it really opens up really nicely.
Yeah, it's true. All right, so I just want to show some pictures also of the vinification. The thing is that I can say they have actually everything. So they have inox like this, and you see it's all small. So they can do every grape, every plot, every parcel. They can do it separately.
Up to 1/5 of a hectare separately.
Yeah.
And wait, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, but your earphone is out, I guess.
Yeah, it's out. It happens. Anyway, so we do every 1/5 of a hectare separately, and we basically, because of that, we've actually managed to select the best plots, and we've gotten rid of the ones that we don't like. Inox is one of them. I don't know if you have pictures of cement and wood. Yes, it makes sense. We have cement and cement eggs. I don't think, outside of the Liguria Sauvignon Blanc Svanne, I don't think you have any more wines that are cement fermented. Sorry. So the Sauvignon Blanc in the Liguria Sauvignon Blanc Svanne is actually fermented. 100% of it is fermented in those cement eggs. So there's a natural batonnage that happens. And then in terms of oak, we use, because of the French influence under Patrick, we use a lot of French oak, but we've also switched a lot to Hungarian oak. We use a lot of Caucasian oak, which is a little bit more earthy, a little bit more tannic. And American oak, I personally don't like it, but some of our neighbors do work with it as well. So quite a lot of variety. And then obviously clay, amphora. These are specifically made. That's called a dodecaeder. It's a 12 pentagrams, and they were designed by our consultant viticulturist Gilles, who actually he has a diploma in bioenergy. He's a very interesting character that I really like very much in terms of his way of seeing wine and his way of winemaking as well. And this we made ourselves. And these wines actually they don't need any additive sulfites, and we don't understand exactly why the wine comes out so balanced that it never goes bad.
Yeah, I can confirm that, because when I was there, we've tasted the Cabernet Franc, and Kathleen, because Kathleen is attending also this tasting, and she is a winemaker in the Loire, so she also makes Cabernet Franc. But making a Cabernet Franc, I've tasted it. One made it in this style of Enoch Cuve, let's call it, and then I've compared it with one I've made in this one, and you have completely two different wines. Here we have a clean one, let's say straightforward one, and here we have an extra dimensional, that's kind of Cabernet Franc. It was a huge difference. It's unbelievable.
Michael, does it has to do with convection also, like you have in?
To be honest, some of the things I personally can't explain. I think there's a lot of faith. It's like with biodynamics is the same thing. The faith element is very important, and you can never discuss anything that has to do with faith. Out of the chemical analysis, you can see that the wines are more stable, but the explanation that, for example, Gilles gives us, you're going to have to take it on faith. It's very hard to actually look at it in some sort of classical way. And we talked a lot about, I've known him for 15 years, and we've talked a lot about this when he worked as head viticulturist for the Rothschild family. All of his experiments with the vineyards, they actually seem a little bit ridiculous if you look at them in retrospective.
But the result is very nice. And is I see the two dodecaeders, are there? These two are the only ones?
We wanted to make more, but we had a problem with the facility used to make them. I think that we'll be making more of them, but right now, like, I don't know why. Maybe because it's hard to make them. Because actually, all of the companies that we talked to in France or Germany refused because it's too complicated to make this, and for them it's a waste of time.
But it's really local. It's the only two that exists in the world.
No, not at all. There's small ones that are made by small producers. For example, Gilles, in his own vineyard in the Rhone Valley, he has a small one as well. Okay. But nobody has I don't know, maybe somebody does, but I don't know of anybody who has these larger ones, about 4,000 liters. Mm-hmm. And obviously the volume is important as well when it comes to keeping the wine and in terms of the evolution of the wine in the dodecaeder. It's like eggs, they actually make so much sense, but at the same time, it's hard to really explain it to somebody who's very educated. There's people who think about chemical compounds and things that they're a little bit too far from the magic of wine.
Yeah. I'm a biologist. I will phone him to discuss about it.
That's a different, I guess, way of seeing it. I've stopped looking into it very, very seriously. I just kind of, I accept it because it's there, It's like certain vineyards are just there, and there's no way of explaining in terms of what they're eating, in the sense, the soil types are not that different, but for some reason, there's a vineyard that is going to be considerably more complex and considerably more long living. So the first wine actually that is made 100% in dodecaeder is the Licuria Cabernet Franc 2018. Okay. And and it's surprising, even though it comes from the same plot as the other ones, it is very different in terms of character. It's much more, it's lighter, it's fruitier, it's got this like floral element. No idea. We don't know exactly what's going on. So we're just gonna have to take it on faith.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and that is
Let's
one I
go to
take,
the
I
next.
guess.
Let's go next. What's your next one?
The next one is the Lefkadia Cabernet Franc. And we take the 2017. Already 18 has arrived, but I still have some 17.
Yeah, I mean they're too young. Let's be honest. I would say it's a very Bulgari style of wine. So it's heavy clay soils. This is our best plot for this style of wine. We make about 3,000 to 4,000 bottles a year. So it's about less than a hectare. Well, it's a hectare, but then we select part of the barrels for that. And this is aged for at least 12 months. Every single barrel is going to be considered separately. So say 12 to 18 months is the general rule for this plot and for this wine. This is all 100% French oak. So it's right now, I think 2017 and 2018, they're going to be 100% Taranceau, which I personally really like. It feels a little bit oaky when it's a little young, but because the fruit is more ripe, it's more structured than the marl soils, because it's 100% clay. It's actually really red clay. Nothing grows on it except for the vines, and this is a style that is associated. I think it's the best style for the Lefkadia brand. I would say it's very New World. It's very fruity. It's a little bit heavier style. It's the Cabernet Franc that I guess best suit for the brand.
I remember my first trip when I came back from doing a tour in Russia, which was 2018. Yeah, April 2018. I came back and I was on the plane with my wife, and I said, "Damn, all the Cabernet Francs, of most of the Cabernet Francs I've tasted, they were really good quality." It's really rare, because if you go to other regions in the world, the Cabernet Franc always has, it mostly has an unripe tannins or something which I don't like a lot. I'm a big fan of Cabernet Franc, but it must be really good made. And for some reason, Cabernet Franc in Russia suits very well. It really works. It really, yeah.
The explanation is very simple. Cabernet Franc needs a shorter growing season than Cabernet Sauvignon. Russia has a short growing season. We only make Cabernet Sauvignon every third year, and we make Cabernet Franc almost every year. And therefore, it's a variety that is more suited to cold. You're not gonna like this, Dimitri, but I personally think that we've reached because we have a Cabernet Franc from a Massal selection from Cheval Blanc, which is a vineyard that we call the Flowers Vineyard, because there's flowers planted around it. And it's our best Cabernet Franc yet. The first vintage was just bottled recently. And I think that to my opinion, we've reached the top that we could reach with Cabernet Franc, but we haven't reached the top that we can reach with Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, or Pinot Noir. So right now, Cabernet Franc, I think that it's going to be within this style that you're tasting a very common occurrence, but the super extra unique things that are coming from the vineyard, the Flowers Vineyard, are going to be there every other year, and you're going to see a lot more coming in from Cabernet Sauvignons and Syrah from the valley, because both us and the neighbors, they're planting a lot more Syrah.
Okay. I have some comments in the chat on people who really like it. It's personally, Michael, it's one of my favorites also. People who really like it, who say it's you can drink it now, but it has a really huge potential to age. Someone is comparing it with the Villani from Hungary, from Geriatila, for example. I see a comparison. Yeah, someone also mentions it's a bottle to lay in your cellar and wait for a few years, but at the same time to drink it now and to be surprised. So nice comments.
We're trying to make wines. I mean, especially with Cabernet Franc, we actually want to make a wine that's going to be there for 20 or 30 years. And sadly enough, it's too popular. And we've sold already in 2018. We're out and we're switching already to 2019, which hasn't yet been bottled. It's going to be bottled in May. So the situation with Cabernet Franc is getting a little bit overheated. And I think Dimitri's point about the fact that Cabernet Franc really works in Russia, it makes sense. But we don't want to lower the quality by increasing the volume. So it's going to be about 4,000 bottles a year, and that's it. A very small volume. And I think we're going to be improving at the same time in terms of quality.
So the clue is here, or the clue, yeah. Wat wil ik nu zeggen eigenlijk? Het idee is hier dat je dus eigenlijk moet reserveren. Komt eigenlijk daarop neer. You need to make a reservation. Everybody who wants the new Cabernet Franc, it is now the moment to make your reservation.
Well, yeah, I guess so. For now, it's still I think a reasonably priced wine, considering that I think it's going to be definitely age worthy for 20 to 30 years. And I mean, the Cabernet Francs that we're drinking right now from 2011 are still very, very young. So, and they come from the same plot. So I think that, yeah, the oakiness especially needs to go away, as well as the acidity needs to come in. It's a wine that needs to develop a little bit more.
I remember the first container I arrived, that I was very curious about my first container. Yeah, he is there. And then I took a bottle when it was just arrived from each range I bought, from every cuvée. And at home, I opened them all and I tasted them all because I was very curious, because I tasted them in Russia. How do they taste now in Belgium? And I remember the Cabernet Franc, the previous one, I forgot the vintage, but it was 16, 13, 14, something like
15
that.
Probably, yeah. 15.
Yeah. And I really had chicken skin. It was, wow, it was amazing. So this is young, but please, this is to stay. This can stay for 20 years, like Michael said. This is an amazing wine. Yeah. I like it a lot. Thanks. But there is even one wine which is much more amazing. This is the next one.
What's next?
The Reserve Red 2013.
Oh, right. Yeah. And this is so basically Patrick, we had the white. Patrick every year made a very different reserve, and he only made 6 vintages, 2010 until 2016, because I remade the 17 and the 18, and because I remade them, we took away the reserve part of the name. So we left the 6 vintages that were made by Patrick Leon, and they're very, very different. There's no I guess there's no unifying element except for the fact that there are mostly Bordeaux varieties in the blend. And it is always French oak. So Patrick was a very French oak sort of guy, which makes sense from a guy from Bordeaux. And he, for the 2013 vintage, used a relatively large percentage of Krasnostop, which we still had. We had the vineyard up to 2015. We used it for dry wines, and after that, we actually started making Ricciotto, well, sweet wines out of it, because there's much alcohol in Krasnostop. And for 2013, you have a lot of rains in September, so the berries got a lot more water, and therefore there's less alcohol than the previous vintage and the vintage after it. Because of that, there's a higher percentage of Krasnostop, because otherwise Krasnostop would get so much sugar, so much alcohol, that it'll be very hard to use it. And in this case, it's such a complicated blend that I would say it's dominated by the spicy side. So there's Syrah, there's Petit Verdot, and there's Krasnostop and Malbec in relatively high percentages. Right now, I think it's drinking quite well, and I would maybe leave it for another 10 years, simply because when you have a high percentage of Krasnostop in the blend, Krasnostop tends to evolve in a manner unknowns to us. We don't exactly know how it evolves. I mean, It's not really quite clear. It's clear that the Bordeaux varieties in it and the Syrah are going to evolve for 30, 40 years, but the Krasnoslop is the big question here. And it's a wine that I guess it's a textbook wine because Patrick left it to us as a sort of experimental gift. About 5,000 bottles made. As I said, a very complex blend, very different aging. So there's 20 months, 16 months, 14 months, every barrel very different and selected, and in his brain he did his thing. And here you have the typical Patrick Leon sort of, there you go, blend. Nobody understood why and when, but he did it, and that's how he did it. And I guess that's the monument that we're drinking. Some people really love it. Some people, I don't know, like it less than the other years. For example, the Robert Parker's rater, Mark Squires, who gave this 90 points, like 2012 and 2014 more. I don't exactly know why. Maybe because 2013 was less ready when he drank it. But in any case, I'd say this is a very interesting Eastern European sort of take on a Bordeaux blend.
I've tasted also the 13 and the 14, and I guess also younger vintages. And the 13 for me is really standing out because it's not overwhelming by alcohol. The other ones, which are also
there's more alcohol there.
More alcohol, and I like the balance in this one. You can drink the bottle. Okay, it's there. It really wants your attention. But this is the Mouton Rothschild from Russia. You can call it like this.
The opposite one, because Mouton is very Mouton. I don't know.
Well, Michael, I see some comments in the chat, and someone is telling me that it's the best wine he has tasted this year, and we're already the month of May almost. So it's the best wine he tasted this year. So I guess he tastes a lot of wines and is the best one. So that's a compliment.
Thanks a lot.
Nice and soft. It's top. Someone else is telling it's top. Someone is asking. It's really a very nice taste. But can you explain more about the aroma in the nose, because it's special and he can't define it.
I think there's it's very hard for us. To understand really what the Krasnoslop plus Syrah plus Bordeaux variety blend, what it should smell like. And in Patrick, he left us all of these different sort of styles. So the Cheryshev blend, 50% Pinot Noir, the Lefkadia blend, the basic blend we call it, right? With a lot of Syrah and a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon. The Lefkadia Reserve blends, every year very different. You have a Malbec dominated 2015, which 50% of it is Malbec. You have a 70% Cabernet Franc 2016. You have this 2013, which is 20. The most that you have of one variety is 21%, I think, Syrah. And there's basically it's a sort of discovery for him and for us what a Russian-made blend would evolve us. Then it's also a very important thing to note that the vines that were used to make this wine, they are the oldest vines come from 2007. So they are not very old vines. They're 6 years old. And the youngest ones are actually 3 years old. So they're young vines in reality. And you already have this sort of complexity, I think, that you can find in wines of considerably older age. And the work, you can see the winemaker's work is very much in there. I can't really quite define anything except for maybe, to me, the 2013, it smells a little bit like Krasnoslop smells, cherry sort of, it's like a maybe caramelized cherry sort of smell, if that's the way I would put it.
Eigenlijk is dat wel waar, hè? Al die stokken, dat is piepjong. Het is ongelooflijk dat je met zulke jonge stokken dat je zoiets kunt. Heel dikwijls, toen dat ik andere domeinen bezocht, proef ook, we gaan op tour naar Rusland natuurlijk, normaal ben ik daar 2-3 keer in een jaar. En dan proeven we daar domeinen die voor de eerste keer wijn maken. die voelt, er is er heel veel potentie, maar als je de eerste keer wijn ermee maakt, heb je dikwijls het gevoel van, oké, dat hangt nog niet echt samen. En dat vraagt nog 1 of 2 jaar later, en dan pas heb je een product die indruk maakt. Maar met deze jonge wijnstokken, it's phenomenal that you can make such a wine with such a young vines. It's really, really, really well done.
To be honest, the first wine we made, 2009 vintage, they're still alive. They're still very young in terms of the way they taste, and I think that's the main argument, that the terroir is there to make really great wines. And maybe right now we don't see ourselves as we don't think we've achieved what we can achieve, and we're still trying new things and we're still moving in new ways. But definitely I think that Russia has a few terroirs that have to be watched, because if you have such young wines, and if you have wineries that are still not 100%, like in the States, they're laser perfect, in the sense they're just the workers, the winery, everything's just ideal. In Russia, it's complicated. It's much more human in that sense. And you're making a wine and you're trying your best, and out of all of that, you can actually every year make some really amazing wines that have a lot of potential. And I think that's the crucial thing that has to be watched. Russia is not a land of open it, drink it, lots of vanilla, great sort of easy taste. I think that most producers that I know, they're trying to think about wines that are going to be great, not only today, but they're going to be very good over many years.
Nu snap je waarom, toen dat ik de eerste keer naar Rusland ging en dat ik eigenlijk omvergeblazen was door de kwaliteit die ze daar brengen. Het is onvoorstelbaar. Je moet eigenlijk naar daar gaan. Eigenlijk moet je er naartoe gaan. Het probleem is, als daar, hij spreekt nu wel Engels, je spreekt ook Frans, je spreekt ook Spaans. Maar goed, dat is een uitzondering. Iedereen spreekt daar Russisch en that's it. Dus je moet daar wel op voorbereid zijn natuurlijk. Maar de gastvrijheid, het eten, de wijnen die je daar ontdekt, zijn uitzonderlijk. Er komen zeker nog nieuwe dingen bij in de toekomst. De hoofdproducent, dus de belangrijkste producent, is uiteraard Lefkadia. Dat is eigenlijk de motor van alles. Die mensen behoren tot de top wat dat Rusland brengt. Je hebt maar een klein deeltje geproefd van het gamma. Er is ook een Merlot die niet op de lijst staat. En er zijn ook bubbels, Temilion, die niet op de lijst staat. Een Temilion Brut, dus een basis, die ligt 60 maanden sur lat. Dat is 5 jaar. Er zijn heel weinig champagnes die 5 jaar sur lat liggen. Dus die gaan we morgen ook op diezelfde lijst zetten. Dat je dat allemaal weet, wat er allemaal is van Lefkadia. Maar die gasten, ik denk dat ze in West-Vlaams staan, ze doen voort. Niet te veel van babbel, maar voortdoen. Je hebt uiteraard een visum nodig, dat is zeker al vast. Maar we kunnen er allemaal bij helpen. Het was eigenlijk ons idee om het jaar die voorbij was in 2020 reizen te organiseren naar daar. Maar ja, dat zal voor een andere keer zijn. Hopelijk binnenkort. Want ik sta te popelen. Mijn valies staat al klaar. We gewoon nog een groen licht krijgen, bij wijze van spreken. Dan zijn we subiet weg. Want Rusland, zoals je dat nu proeft, mijn inziens, dat smaakt naar meer. Ik bedoel, dat is fantastisch. Ik wil ook nog zeggen, er is een gewone Cabernet Franc. De Liguria maakt ook een Cabernet Franc, die zeker ook de moeite is om ooit eens te proberen. Eigenlijk gaan ze het hammen. If we go to the Bachelor Collection, if you go to the Cabernet Franc, the Bachelor Collection, I will tell you a story, Michael. Not so long ago, I had a very good customer who said, I have a friend who is drinking all the big names from Bordeaux. And he called Petrus, he called Mouton Rothschild, he called Le Pen. He really drinking these wines. So he is one of the, the most wealthiest guy in this region. And he said, he's my guest. How can I surprise this man? I say, okay, if he's open-minded, yeah, I guess he's open-minded. So, okay, let's go to Russia. I will sell you the Bachelor Collection Cabernet Franc, and you give him blind. And afterwards, you tell him what it is. And he did it like that. And I saw him 3 days after, and he say, and how was your date? How was your, your evening? And I say, you know what he's saying? You know what he said to me? I have chicken skin. I rarely have chicken skin of a wine. I only have it a couple of times in my life, but from this wine, he makes me, wow, what is this? This is amazing. And it
No,
was,
that's the way we actually try to make the collections. In the sense, when the wine, to me as a producer, just making a wine that tastes well is not complicated. To be honest, there's a lot of great tasting wines out there. The most important thing to me is the way that the wine enters you. So
makes an impression.
yeah, no, no, it's just it's a metaphysical sort of thing, you know. If you feel that the wine makes you happier, then that is the best reaction that you should be getting. It's, in my opinion, it's a balance of taste, obviously, of the basic elements, but there's also something else, and that something else it's really hard to find. And that's why we keep the top wines in a very small volume, because we select not only the parcels that we know quite well over the years, but also the barrels. And we would select maybe less than 50% of the barrels for any given plot to make our top wine. But again, hopefully the wines are liked, and I know that even if there are some comments, we know ourselves where every year we might make something better, and we're perfectionists, and we're really trying hard to make that thing, to move it forward.
Michael, before I go to some general remarks on the chat, there's one question who triggers me also based on this last wine we tasted. Someone is asking, would you give it a try to make this wine based on this blend, or is the gift aspect too precious for you to retry it, knowing that you probably would not make exact the same wine as this, which is of course perfect? So that's the question.
Well, if I understand it well, we would try the same blend. First of all, I think that the wines we make now are better than the wines we used to make then. And I'll be honest with it. Maybe because I'm involved in them, and I think that I'm better, but that's something that I think everybody should think if they're working. At the same time, we don't have the Krasnostop anymore. So we got rid of the vineyard because we don't like the way that it's performing. It's too much alcohol. The evolution is a little bit boring. So even though I know there's an exciting element, we have an autochthonous variety in the blend, and it's supposed to be great and fun and original. But I think that if the wine that comes out of it is not as good as the wine that would be without the variety, then we should make a value judgment and just, well, forget about it.
Yes.
So right now, the new blends, I like them more personally, and they're lower in alcohol. They are the oak is a little bit more integrated. So, for example, in those days they used to use more Radu and more of a fruity oak. Now you can barely feel that there's any oak, even though they might be aged for 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
The acidity levels are higher because we pick later, and the ripeness cycle is a little bit different now because the vineyards have gotten a little older. They don't ripen as fast.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the wines that are being made now are more interesting, but do I think that we'll be able to surpass Patrick and his style? No, of course not. So we're not trying to make the same wine. We are trying to make a different wine that we think might have an impact. So when it comes to our top level blend, we want to make a blend that is going to have an impact. And my first, you could say, top level blend was a 2019 blend, which actually ended up being 50% Malbec, even though I personally don't drink Malbec because I get drunk from it. So I despite the fact that I'm not a big Malbec fan, I had to admit, and I have to admit, that when I did the blend, and it's only a 6-barrel blend, so it's a very small volume. That 50% Malbec was a very important thing, because well, I think that's the way we're going. We're going to a more fruity style. To me, the earlier blends are very hard to define because there's no dominant variety. And over the years, we found that the smarter way to do a blend is to have a dominant variety that would be enriched by the other varieties.
Yeah, it's
But
a fair answer. It's a fair answer. Some nice comments on the chat. Surprisingly nice wines. Thanks a lot. Top wines, fantastic. Discovery. Chicken skin, by the way, is goosebumps. Surprisingly nice wines. It was top. Someone also mentioned the Temelion Brut, the sparkle. That was top when he tasted it.
Timelions are amazing. I mean, I'm gonna be honest here, no lying. The new Timelions with the new vintages are just really, really good.
Yeah.
And the vineyards have gotten older, and we've started working with oak. The new Timelions are really, really good. So there's a lot of good things coming up as well.
Super. And someone is asking if we have some stock left on the last wine. Yes, we have. We have, so no problem. And someone is asking.
The only ones who do have, because we have already switched to 2014.
Okay.
We don't have any 2013 left.
Okay, so it's good we have some 2013. Someone is asking if it's easy to travel in Russia. Yes, it is. Except.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the coronavirus restrictions, they actually have a new electronic visa, and all Europeans, it's like an ESTA to the United States. You can apply online. You get a 14-day visa. It's super easy. It used to be much more complicated. When Dimitri used to come, you came. It used to be considerably more complicated than it is now.
Voilà, dus het is zeer gemakkelijk om naar Rusland te gaan. Het is een elektronisch visum. Dat was toen dat Dimitri en dan toen dat wij er samen geweest zijn een stuk anders. Maar het is dus zeer gemakkelijk om een visum aan te vragen en uiteindelijk rond te reizen. Moest je dat ooit doen, zeg het ons. Dan moet je sowieso een keer gaan kijken bij Michael. So okay, yeah, someone is mentioning thanks for the masterclass on Russian wines. So I think we surprised everyone, so that's very nice. And someone is mentioning we don't have to surpass Patrick, but I'm curious, yeah, and he's curious in the same way to taste more or similar blends. By the way, dus wat ik ook wil zeggen, dus we hebben nu eigenlijk een staalname geproefd van wat we in ons overzicht hebben aan Russische wijnen. We hebben er een groot aantal niet geproefd. Dus hopelijk zo vlug mogelijk kunnen we terug live tastings doen. En gaan er sowieso terug ook weer Russische wijnen geproefd zijn. Nu iedereen ook altijd welkom in de winkel, zou ik zeggen, bij Start2Taste. We hebben dikwijls ook flessen onder Coravin staan. Wat dus wil zeggen dat er ook wel verschillende zaken die we niet geproefd hebben nu wel te proeven zijn in de winkel in Waregem. Geef gerust een seintje als je langskomt. En dan zien wij wat we kunnen doen voor jullie. Okay, back to Dimitri.
Michael, I just have one question because a lot of people, when they talk with me or with Hans about the Russian wines, the main topic will always be autonomous grape. So, you know, most of them are, let's call it international grapes. Everybody is wondering or asking for typical grapes from Russia. What is your opinion about that? What is going to be the future for Russia? Is it already a little bit clear, or how can I say it, discussed?
Well, there's we talked about the Don area, which has a lot of autochthonous varieties, and they're definitely much better than the international varieties in the area, because in the Don area, most of the vineyards have to be covered, they have to be buried in the winter, same as in northern China. And for a vine to be buried, it needs to be very reductive. It gets oxidized very quickly, so you need to have very reductive varieties. And in the sense, it's hard to surpass in the Don area the local varieties. I am personally not a big fan of the wines made from them, except for Tsemlyansky Chorny, which was the variety historically used for that sparkling wine that I said, the Méthode Ancestrale sparkling wine. I think it makes a great rosé wine, and I think Russia is going to be a great destination for interesting rosé wines made from local varieties. We're actually coming up with a rosé wine, which is basically a Georgian variety wine, which there's Rocketsteady, Svan, Alexandrauli, things like that. And that is one of the basically strongholds for autochthonous varieties. For the Black Sea region, let's be honest, I don't see any great autochthonous variety in any Black Sea area for red wines. So I don't like anything in Georgia outside of Sapiravi, Alexandrauli, and maybe a couple of the new ones that there's very few vineyards that you can actually really understand how the variety works. I'm not a big fan of the Armenian varieties, and then I'm definitely not a big fan of everything that's going on in Eastern Europe. So Bulgaria or Romania or Moldavia or Turkey for red varieties. So it's a matter of preference. But I think that Russia will be moving in a more American direction. So things that are tasty, things that are good, things that are age-worthy will surpass things that are fashionable and things that are fancy and unique. One thing that is going to be very important, those looking at red varieties. For white varieties, the discussion is much broader because Crimea has a variety called Kokur, and Kokur is very, very, very good, and even Gilles Ray is a big fan of it. And I think Kokur is going to be much more recognized over the years, and we're going to try to plant it as well. Plus, Georgia has a lot of great white varieties. Rocketsteady is a little bit of a questionable variety because it's a high-yielding, highly acidic variety that is good for brandy mostly. But Svane is great, especially the Svanes that are from the mountains. You have Tsitska, Krahuna. You have a lot of varieties that are good. Also good white varieties in Armenia. So there's a lot of potential in that direction, and especially to make orange wines. So all of these white varieties are a little bit more aromatic, which is good for an orange wine. Plus, there's a lot of Muscat planted in Russia and all of Eastern Europe, and Muscat is really good for orange wines. So I think that orange and rosé are the big sort of themes coming out of Eastern Europe and Russia as well. Not a lot of producers right now, but definitely a lot more will be coming out. And if you look at your wine list, I understand that getting a red Russian is going to be too complicated. There's very few great Russian red wines, and they're going to be very expensive because the demand for them is very high. I can sell a Bachelor Collection red for any money that I want, basically, because I make maybe less than 1,000 bottles a year, and not every year. But for white wines, on the other side, also complicated because most of the white wine varieties that exist in Russia, it's complicated to grow them. Outside of Rusan, Marsan, but there's very few vineyards. And Viognier, the big problem is it's not a really accepted grape globally because of the cheap Viognier coming out of Australia. But white and red on the sides, orange and rosé, those are elements that you can focus in. Maybe something original like carbonic or Kvevri or amphora, things like that. Or maybe something original because it's just made by some guy like Patrick Leon who's just a really top level winemaker, and that's just a unique, in my opinion, experience to have a French team like aliens come into Russia and plant French varieties, high density, and work them as if it was a little bit of a province of Bordeaux, but in Russia. So that's I think that's a cool thing to try, and I think that's definitely an area to explore. As you said, the Bachelor Collection is just the more extreme version of those wines.
Okay, thanks. I see a lot of very nice comments, so thank you everyone for the very nice comments on the chat. People are mentioning I was triggered, now I'm convinced. So that's the wrap up, let's say, of this evening. Someone is also asking, are there new tastings planned? Ja, er zijn nieuwe tastings gepland. We hebben sowieso een aantal zaken in ons achterhoofd, laat ons zeggen, of in ons voorhoofd samengehandeld. Maar we hebben een tasting die aankomt en dat het is namelijk zo. Dat we de winkel uitgebreid hebben bij Start2Taste. Dus dat we dus ook een groot aantal spirits gaan bijdoen. Ook de zaken die zo'n keer off-road zijn. Hè, de wat nieuwere, verrassende zaken. En we hebben ook onder andere in ons gamma hebben we sake's, Japanse sake. Japanse sake is gewoon schitterend. Zeer verrassend, zeer mooie complexiteit. Ook zeer mooi om te combineren met food, met eten. Dus die sake-proeverij die komt eraan. Als ik me niet vergis, Dimitri, hebben we die op de 11e mei gezet. Ja. Dus op 11 mei, je kunt dat ook al via de website zien, kunt je boeken voor die sake-proeverij. Als je echt niet goed weet van sake. Is dat nu zoiets heel straf? Of moet ik dan denken aan iets wat ik kreeg vroeger? Als ik naar de Chinees ging eten, op het einde kreeg ik daar zoiets dat lauw was en eigenlijk niet zo goed smaakte. Nee, sake is echt wel iets anders. Dus dat komt eraan. Maar voor vanavond, voilà. Very nice tasting, very nice comments. Thanks a lot, Michael, for your explanation. Ik denk dat iedereen zo het nu een beetje een beeld heeft van tot wat Rusland in staat is om te maken aan verrassingen, aan verrassende wijnen en vooral aan verrassende smaken. Ik denk daarbij ook aan hetgeen dat Michael gezegd heeft naar rosé en orange. We hebben trouwens in ons gamma ook een Liguria Rekatsiteli orange wine die zeer verrassend is. Dus die staat ook op jullie lijst. Voilà. Dan rest mij alleen om te zeggen dat we gaan doen zoals dat we anders doen bij tastings. Namelijk als je via een mailtje naar mij of naar Dimitri, als je een antwoord... Ik ga trouwens de link ook doorsturen naar de opname van vanavond. Ik ga jullie allemaal een mail sturen. Als je in de komende periode, we gaan dat wel definiëren, een bestelling doet, dan gaan wij jullie met plezier 10% korting geven op het volledige gamma van de Russische wijn. Ik zou zeggen, als je mocht samenzitten terug met mensen, weliswaar op afstand of buiten, verrassen op jullie beurt met hetgeen dat jullie vanavond ontdekt hebben. Dat zal zeker in de smaak vallen als ik de commentaren lees. Iemand vraagt mij wat zijn orange wines. Gewoon even qua toelichting. Orange wines zijn rode wijnen. Er zijn witte wijnen waar dat er een beetje schilcontact is geweest. Dus de schil wordt even in het sap gelaten, waardoor dat je eigenlijk ook wat extractie krijgt van tannines. En dat je dus een heel complexe witte, eigenlijk orange kleur wine krijgt. Of wijn krijgt. Voilà, en dan laat ik het laatste woord dan aan Dimitri als afsluiter.
Ja, dankjewel Hans. Dus ja, inderdaad die 10% op alle Russische wijnen. Morgen krijg je daar een mail van. De Merlot ontbreekt op deze lijst en de 10 miljoen, de bubbels ontbreken. Dat komt er morgen bij. Die sake-tasting staat nog niet online, maar dat zal morgen ook online staan. Maar dat zal ook in die mail staan. Zeker de moeite. Sake is geen spirit, voor alle duidelijkheid. Dat is een stijl wijn. Dat is 14, 15, 16% alcohol. Dus be surprised. I was blown away van de sake's. Dus zeker doen. We hebben een Japanoloog dan, die Nederlands spreekt uiteraard, maar ook Japans. Maar het is een Vlaming die ons mee zal nemen in de wereld van sake. Dus zeer, zeer, zeer interessant. Heel boeiend. But okay, Michael, thank you very much for making time for us. Thank you very much for being one of the hosts of these tasting. I'm convinced I'm, let's say, the ambassador for Russian wines. People are convinced, everybody loves the wine, so we are on a good road. You're on a good road. So let's give some more firework together in the future.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, everybody, for coming in and for the tasting. I do hope that you get to try everything else that Dimitri brought to Belgium. For example, the Liqueur Reserve White, which we talked a little bit about whether we should bring it to the tasting or not. To me, the only problem is that it's the last vintage we're going to make this wine because it's so good that we're selling it too cheap. I'll be honest with you. And it's our best-selling wine. I think it's one of those that really convinces you that Russia can be a very interesting winemaking region for things that you don't expect. Also, stay with us. As I say, there's more things coming in, and I know that, for example, Dimitri has come to Russia. He's tasted everything. He knows that it's moving, in my opinion, in a very good direction. And we're really trying hard. We'd love to hear your feedback, and anything is always good. Any comment, be it positive or negative, And as I said, Russia is one of those countries that maybe it seems that it's so far away from winemaking, but we learn really fast. And I think we're very good learners. So we're going to make a great wine. I'm sure of it.